Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Dave. We're the IB English guys. Welcome back. Happy New Year. We're going to talk about a very important text type, and that is multi-panel comics.
That's right, folks. This is an important text type for paper one or for the individual oral or even for the higher level essay. So we want to pay attention and really dive in. Mr. Giles, we have a mnemonic to help us with this.
We do. We think it's a great way for us to kind of enter into a multi-panel comic. And we like where we live in Thailand, so we love coral. So our mnemonic goes, coral needs our care and love.
Okay, coral needs our care and love. Mr. Giles, the C stands for composition. Of course, the composition, we could be thinking about perspective, we could be thinking about framing, background, foreground, all of those. How are the elements arranged on the page?
That's right. N stands for narrative. We want to remember that with a multi-panel comic in particular, with all these panels, there's a narrative, there's a story. So we think about characters, we think about conflicts, setting, all the elements of story.
The O stands for objects and symbols. This is where we want to look at those concrete nouns and see if there's any symbolic meaning behind any of those key objects.
Yeah, that's great. The C stands for color and shading. So we have to remember that color connotes lots of different things. So we want to think about the different use of color, the shading, the graphic weight, all those things help to convey a message.
And of course, the L stands for language. This is a language class. We need to be thinking about words and how they're being used. We want to look at figurative language. We want to look at symbolic language, the connotation of words, really break down language. So many elements to consider when we're looking at multi-panel comics.
That's right. So we've chosen a multi-panel comic from a cartoonist that lives in Portland, Oregon. He is a fairly liberal artist, and he writes about a variety of issues. And this particular one we thought was important. It's about climate change.
Yeah, that's right. The guiding question for this particular multi-panel comic reads as follows. How does the multi-panel comic use textual and visual elements to communicate a message about climate change?
Okay, so this is a standard guiding question. They're asking us to think about both the language, the textual elements, but also the visual elements. And they're asking, what is the message about climate change that Barry Deutsch is telling us?
Now, Mr. Giles, let's take our coral needs our care and love and apply it to this cartoon from Barry Deutsch. Let's start with the C, coral composition. What do you notice?
Yeah, well, we're thinking that we have 9 panels to talk about. If we want to think about the arrangement, the sort of sequence of those panels, one of the things I'm noticing, obviously in the foreground, are these 2 female characters that are roped together. And this is an interesting setting on the train tracks. We also notice that we have different camera distance. So at times we have an establishing shot in panel number 1, and then we have kind of a medium shot in panels 2, 3, and 4. At times we also have a little bit of close-up shot. So we have some different things that we can talk about in terms of
Also, holistically, we see that there are 9 panels. And then at the bottom of the cartoon, it looks like there's some commentary where we see the cartoonist himself on the right, Barry Deutsch, talking to a friend. And they're talking about some commentary we'll get to momentarily. So that's the C, composition. The N is narrative, Mr. Giles, and we definitely have a clear story. Would you mind taking us through some of the elements of the story?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we have a setting. The setting is like being on the train tracks in this somewhat kind of desolate rural area. And they're playing up on the common trope of someone being tied up on the train tracks, yeah? But this time they've kind of subverted the trope because then we have 2 people tied together back to back on the train track.
That's right. Now, in panels 2, 3, 4, and 5, we see that characterization and that rising action of our story. We see this conflict between these characters, whether they're debating the truth or the fallacy of climate change. And then this story has a climax as well, where we see in the crash panel, and of course, there's a resolution where we see the 2 angelic characters. So this story, this multi-panel comic, has a clear narrative structure. We want to use those words in our analysis.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Then we have objects and symbols. And this particular the entire comic is symbolic. It's an allegory for climate change. It's not really about two women on a train track. It's really about the different opinions about climate change. So this is interesting. The train itself is a metaphor for this oncoming, disaster that's headed. When you're on a train track, a train is going to pass by.
You're on a fixed path, Mr. Judd.
There's a definite, we know that that's a fixed path.
Other smaller symbols you might want to look at in this cartoon, of course, we have the rope, implying that the characters are being trapped by their conflict. We have the crash panel, and of course, we have those angelic wings at the end that symbolizes that they're no longer with us, Mr. Giles.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And then we want to think about color and shading. Color's interesting. We notice that the background color is quite muted and kind of in those earth tones, and perhaps that conveys the sort of seriousness of the issue of climate change. But it also the contrast between the color of these characters and kind of a grayish tone. It really makes them stand out, right?
Yeah, it's
There's a centerpiece.
It's sort of a sullen and depressing mood as well, Mr. Giles. And then we have that crash panel. You have that contrast of colors really makes that climax of the multi-panel comic stand out, okay?
That's
Of course, the L is Coral needs our care and love. L is language. Mr. Giles, what are a few things that you could talk about, well, with respect to language?
Well, first of all, we use two characters. One is the dark-haired character, and her language is quite urgent, right? She's really like shocked that they're on the train tracks. Then she offers, in panel number 2, she's like, "Well, if we work together, we can get off the train tracks." So she's like, conveying the idea. So we have her tone, and then it becomes increasingly more urgent as the train is really coming. The other character, can you talk about her tone, the reverb language?
Yeah, looking at panel number 5, we can see her reply, engineers. So she has a really complacent tone. It seems like despite the one character's urgency about the impending doom of a train coming to slaughter them, the second character really is complacent and doesn't see any need to panic.
Yeah, and you can see that urgency, and then in panel number 6, she's like, "Let's get off." We see the bolded text, "Let's get off the tracks just in case. Hurry!" And again, you see the emanata illuminating from her face, and then the close up. The close up in panel number 7, when the dark hair character is literally like sees the train. We see the close up, shot of her, and we see this, "We are going to die." This sort of like that. That's high modality language.
I can't help but connect that to your damsel in distress comment from before where it says you're being hysterical, sort of that play on the gender, the woman being hysterical in a really urgent situation. So we see that as well. The final panel, it says, okay, maybe there was a train. What can you say about that sarcastic language, Mr. Giles?
Yeah, it's herein lies the punchline, because again, the implication is that they're no longer with us; they've perished. Which the implication is that the human race will perish with climate change. And then the denier is, even at the end, she's saying, "Oh, well, she's not admitting there was a train. She's like, maybe there was a train."
And that final question, what's wrong with you? It's almost Barry Deutsch posing a question to his entire readership. He's asking, what's wrong with you, all of you climate change deniers, right? So it's sort of a final question that Deutsch poses to the overall readership. Mr. Giles, we've done well breaking it down, but I'd really like to get our viewers to a main claim. We had that guiding question. How does the multi-panel comic use textual and visual elements to communicate a message about climate change? Let's go through a little protocol. We like to think about some key words before we build our main claim. We like to use the phrase, this is a text about. What's this a text about, Mr. Giles?
Oh, this is a text about climate change denial.
Yeah, this is a text about illusion versus reality, people who believe in climate change versus people who don't.
This is a text about imminent danger.
Yeah, this is a text about conflict.
Yeah, this is a text about persuasion.
This is a text about complacency.
Yeah, that's great. This is a text about, fear and anxiety, as illuminated by that woman on the track.
So now that we have a list of keywords, the idea is to sort of combine and smash some of those keywords together and come up with a main claim. What did the student come up with, Mr. Giles?
They wrote, through the text and visual elements, Deutsch argues that, despite climate change denial, conflict is imminent, and we must not be complacent to the realities of a changing environment.
Ooh, I like that, Mr. Giles. They got the text and visual elements from the guiding question. They've got the word climate change denial. They have conflict. They have complacence. And they have reality from our list. Looks like they were able to assemble quite a strong thesis statement.
And now that we've done Coral Needs Our Care and Love, we're armed with all those rich visual and textual elements, like all those things that we talked about that we're going to use in our analysis.
Yeah, so folks, there's plenty to write about. Come on back, stay with the channel. We'll guide you through more textual analysis, whether it's non-literary or literary, and guide you to assessment success.
Thanks, guys.